Good afternoon, good day, good evening. Thanks for turning the music down. Good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversation with Dr. Don show. And there goes intro music. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. The title of tonight's show is Genetically Modified Organisms. And that's a big, hairy subject. And my guest tonight is Kelly Caldwell, who I'm glad to see again for a number of reasons. And she reminded me that years ago that she had been on the show before with a Code Pink crew, and we had a good time then. And we're going to have a better time tonight.
All right.
How are you feeling right now?
Great. I'm ready to go.
You said you were nervous a few minutes ago. I am.
I'll try not to be nervous.
Okay, all right. As you know, the show goes in two major segments. The first segment is the getting to know you, the bio segment. I'll ask you personal questions about who you are and whatever else that comes to mind, where you went to school, and things that come up that may be of interest to our viewers.
Okay.
And the second half is we will talk about genetically modified organisms and anything else that comes up as a result of talking about that. I got a cheat sheet of questions, what to ask you, and it's kind of brief, but I'm sure we'll have enough other questions to address genetically modified organisms. Let's start with the Who Are You segment, okay? If I were to ask your best friend, who is Kelly, what would he or she say? Kelly is?
Kelly is enthusiastic, politically and socially engaged, someone who cares about the world and who likes to involve other people in making positive community change.
Wow, you got that down. Most guests always struggle with that, and they don't know what their best friend would say. How many best friends do you have?
I have a good group of friends. A lot of activists and volunteers and people who really give a darn about something. You know, that's most of my friends, one way or the other.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in Utah.
Utah?
Yeah.
And how long have you been out here?
Oh, I actually moved all around. I've lived in 12 states, and I moved into Oregon in 2000. So I've been here about 12 years.
12 years. How come you moved around so much?
You know, my parents had some job instability, and it was just that time of life. But I've actually lived in Oregon longer than I've lived anywhere.
Are you going to stay here?
Yeah, absolutely. I love it here. I love the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. Is there anything significant about your cultural heritage that's worth talking about, or are you just plain old American white bread?
I suppose I'm fairly white bread, but I would say that I actually think that the experience of white bread, if you will, in this culture is a loss of culturally rich aspects of more specific ethnicities and subgroups. So I'm actually a person who feels that we should really value the diversity of ideas and thoughts and groups and cultures, and that we would be better off to really honor and appreciate that as opposed to kind of the assimilation melting pot that is sort of the model that we often think of.
I like that word, embracing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you about your religious preference? Do you have one, or do you want to answer that question?
You know, I consider myself actually interfaith. I have been exposed to a lot of different beliefs and religions, and I've come to the conclusion that it's sort of many paths up the same mountain, that everyone's kind of talking about the same thing, that different religions and belief systems are more alike than they are different, and that there may be social or cultural differences but it's like different languages. You can speak in French or English or German, but if we're speaking, say, about the divine, each religion is kind of a different language or a different lens to understand the divine. So I consider myself a spiritual person. I work for an interfaith volunteer program right now, and it is very rewarding, and I get to work with Buddhists and Jews and Muslims and Christians of all types, and we also say that if you have faith in humanity, that's good enough. So secular people are welcome, and it's been incredibly meaningful for me, and I think that we have more in common than we do different, and that we tend to focus on our differences.
Boy, this is going to be a great hour. Yes, indeed.
I really like Buddhism a lot, but I'm not exclusively Buddhist. But I do currently attend a Buddhist group regularly, and I love to read books by the Dalai Lama.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
You said you're spiritual.
Yeah.
What is that? What is spiritual?
I personally, first of all, I respect that people can have lots of different points of view, and I don't think that there's one that's empirically better than the other when it comes to religion and spirituality. I believe that we are connected to something bigger than us, that there's the kind of great mysteries of the universe, and I'm fascinated by the way that as different scientists, Albert Einstein and other people, get more and more into science, they get more metaphysical and more spiritually minded. There's not a conflict between science and religion, but they are different ways to sort of, once again, climb up the same mountain and try to describe the unknown. So, yeah.
So
I choose to believe in something bigger and greater because I think it feels hopeful, and I think that hope is an important energy for living. So that's kind of a conscious choice. And I think there's a lot of evidence, including nature in particular, for the idea that there's something bigger going on here. And the beauty of nature and the respect for nature is something that really drives the work that I came here to talk about today.
Need there be something bigger?
I don't know, but I think that there is, and I think that however you come down on it, it's okay. It's okay to have a different point of view. I think once again that it's the richness of different points of view that really make life interesting. I wouldn't want everyone to see things like I do.
We're going to need 2 hours.
Maybe so.
How about your formal education?
Well, I got a bachelor's of science in natural resources and environment.
A real tree hugger. Huh?
I'm a real tree hugger. And I went to the University of Michigan for that, and learned a lot about vegetative management and plants and soil and economics of natural resources and that kind of thing. And then I took a couple years off, and then I went to graduate school and studied. I got a master's in urban and regional planning. But really what I consider that my focus was studying public participation, how people are involved in public decisions, and how we can all be involved in the discussion about what makes a good community, or what kind of policies and issues are important to us at a very local level to a global level. So that really excites me, that kind of collective coming to the common good, is something that really I feel passionate about, and I'm very interested in that process.
Where did you get your look at life and what's important to you? Where'd you get that from?
That's a good question.
Mom, Dad?
I think my parents in part, and I was a big reader. When I was a kid, I loved to read books, and just asking questions, the inquiry and education, I think, really keep life interesting.
Yes. So you're working now for, tell me again who you're working for?
I work for an interfaith volunteer program called Lift Urban Portland. It functions in the downtown and northwest areas of Portland, and we focus on a couple different areas. One is nutrition support. We run an emergency food pantry. We deliver food boxes to homebound seniors, and have a Food for Kids backpack program, and a couple years, I've been there about 5 years, and a couple years ago we started some organic garden projects to increase the access to produce, be able to control how much we had when, and to bring up the issues of nutrition and healthy eating to folks, to the community, to the people that we serve. So I'm pretty involved in gardening. I'm a home gardener, and kind of developed more and more gardens and learned more about the different gardening groups and organizations in the metro area, which are really amazing. So, yeah.
It shows on your face that you
Yeah.
enjoy when you're talking about what you're doing.
Yes, I think that gardening, and in particular organic gardening, is very important. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into our topic.
Okay. If we get into our topic.
Oh, we'll get there.
Yeah. Do you have a partner, a boyfriend, girlfriend, a husband, wife, or anything like that at all?
I have a domestic partner, yes. And my partner works for the public health, in public health for the state of Oregon. So we're both do-gooders and crusading for the public well-being.
You've been together for a while.
Over 5 years, yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
And today's National Coming Out Day, by the way. So I'm coming out on your show, I suppose.
Really? Well, hooray!
Yes.
Thank you, yeah.
And it was actually 22 years ago, I'm older than I look maybe, on National Coming Out Day when I first publicly did that. So that's a little bit aside from what we're talking about, but you know, a little bit about me, you know, politically active from a very young age and engaged in important issues. I think that's, you know, not necessarily the most important thing about our conversation today, but it's good for people to know that there's all different kinds of people out there, and that, you know, we all contribute to the bigger good, I think.
Yeah. Your partner is fortunate to have you. Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah. Political persuasion, do you comment about that at all? Left, right, center, off the continuum, or what?
Usually when people ask me if I'm political, my answer is yes. And I'd like to say that I could hope to work with lots of different people. But I'm pretty, I'm a little towards the left for sure. I'm on in terms of feeling that I think this is this individual versus collective thing. And I think that we're all connected, and so the collective issues are important. And I'm a person who, say, might be more interested in regulating, say, what agribusiness could do, as opposed to and a person who would say that we have the right to do whatever we want, even if other people have to pay the costs of our choices, which I think is a lot of the when I was studying natural resources, I learned a lot about the costs that are hard to put a dollar amount on. You know, pollution, lack of fish in the seas because of overfishing. There's a lot of tragedy of the commons, and so I'm a person in favor of regulating the few for the good of the many. Definitely.
Yeah.
So that puts me on the left.
I think so. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations other than the one you mentioned. Do you have any memberships in?
Well, I'm part of a group called GMO Free Oregon, which I've been active in for about a year, and that's one of the reasons.
The corporations don't like you, do you know that?
Probably not. So that's a group that I'm part of. I'm part of a group called Sisters in Strength, which is a women's activism group where we do activism together and we support each other. You know, we do things like skill building and social and emotional connections, relationship building, and activism support for women. It's definitely a feminist organization.
Yeah. Persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or look up to. Any names come to mind?
Well, I mentioned the Dalai Lama already.
Yeah.
One of his favorite books I read was about interfaith collaboration. I also really like a woman named Vandana Shiva. She is from India and very active in seed sovereignty and supporting the rights of women in agriculture and of people's right to save seeds and to promote biodiversity as opposed to corporate farming. So I met her in Portland.
Really?
And didn't have a lot of chance to connect with her, but we made eye contact, and she really inspired me to take the next step, to keep moving forward and not to give up. So.
Seed sovereignty.
Seed
Say
sovereignty.
a few words about that. What is that?
Seed sovereignty is about the idea that we need to stop allowing corporations to buy up all of the seeds, and stop them from being able to patent seeds and patent nature. The idea that nature has its own sovereignty and that farmers have the right to save seeds. And there's actually around the world, that's a big issue. You don't necessarily hear about it a ton in Oregon, but it's a huge issue worldwide.
So then if they can genetically modify a particular seed, then they can get a patent on it, and anybody else who decides to or stumbles across that seed and plants it, then never mind, I'm getting into the...
Well, that's something that I think we should talk about. There's there's a Canadian farmer who was sued by Monsanto when pollen from another farm went over onto his farm, and he considered that pollution, but Monsanto considered that patent infringement. So there's a lot of court cases, and we should use the legal system and all of our tools to, I think, appreciate and support biodiversity and the natural world and the right of us all to have control over what we're eating and to live in harmony with nature as much as possible. So.
All right. What's right with America today, generally speaking? What's right with our country?
Well, I think that we have made a lot of progress in terms of women's rights, work fighting racism and oppression. I think we have ways to go, but I think that we've definitely made progress in my lifetime. I think that generally speaking, that there's social mobility in the United States that I think is a really good thing, and we're able to, travel and visit other people, and I think United States people who live in the United States are generally quite lucky. Things like running water, flush toilets, access to resources, education, health care. Certainly not every American has those, but we have some good averages worldwide. We're on the top of the pile, even if the pile sometimes isn't quite. There's always something to criticize, but I consider myself a person with a lot of luck and privilege to be, an American, and to be a person that had access to education, to be a white person in an environment where sometimes people are judged on their appearance alone. So I try to use those aspects of my personality and my life to make positive change and to use my personal power to help empower others and to make good things happen.
That was a setup for my next question. You know what the next question is, don't you?
No.
What's wrong with America?
Goodness
We've only got 2
gracious.
hours now,
That's well, that's a big question.
Of course it is.
I think that although there's been progress, there's area, I think I'd like to see the disparities of access to education and resources more evened out. Mm-hmm. I think that...
Limit to 2 or 3 things. I want to put you to work
I think education, healthy food, and things like dental care are huge.
That's what's wrong.
Yeah, I think that if people had access to safe, healthy food and access to good education and some decent health care, I think, overall we're doing pretty good.
Okay. show before we take a break. We're about halfway through there. It's near time for a break here. But genetically.
Well, let's talk about the fact that I'm running for office. How about that?
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that. You're running for office.
I'm running for office.
Let's talk about that.
Vandana Shiva, and then there's another, a woman named Holly Neer, who's been a singer and a peace activist,
Oh, yes.
anti-nuke activist for many years. I saw her sing this summer, and she was encouraging people to vote and to do more, to take the next step, to consider, especially women running for office. You know, only about 17% of our elected officials at the national level are women. And so I got inspired to run for office. And so I'm on the ballot in November 2012 for the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. A lot of people have never heard about that, and so I'd love to tell you a little bit more about that district and what it does. And,
Please do.
well, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts started in the 30s and 40s in a response to the Dust Bowl years and all of that. In Oregon, there are 45 soil and water conservation districts, and the East Multnomah District covers the entire area of East Multnomah County, from the Willamette River to East County, you know, east of Gresham, where the East Multnomah County line
And we're talking
ends.
about Oregon now,
Yeah,
yes.
in Oregon, the entire area bordered by the Willamette River, including St. John's, Northeast Portland, Southeast Portland, Gresham, Fairview, I believe over 200,000 people live in that area. And so the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District has its own financial base from property taxes, has a operating budget of over $1 million a year, and is focused on promoting clean water and healthy soil through non-regulatory means. So they don't make rules, but they work cooperatively with residences, business owners, farmers, and provide resources, technical assistance, grants, education, so that we can all do what we can to promote healthy soil and clean water. So given my background in natural resources and my concern about the collective good, it seemed like a perfect fit for me to run for office for the first time. So, yeah. We'll see if I make it. There's 5 people running, which is, they can't remember the last time that 5 people were running for that position. It must be because it's an election year. So, yeah.
You're gonna win?
I might win. You know, I have a platform, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about maybe after our break, that I think, I feel like I'll win either way if I got an opportunity to bring the issues that concern me a little more public, like this show, and, you know, what I've listed in the voter's guide, and, you know, helping people learn more about the risks of herbicides and pesticides and the concerns about genetically modified organisms and genetically engineered foods. So those are, you know, and promoting organic gardening. Those are the reasons really that I wanted to run, with an extra interest on making sure that the folks that maybe have never heard about the East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District learn a little bit, hear about it, have an opportunity to engage. I speak Spanish, and so I look forward to the opportunity to support the development of more materials in Spanish, especially as a good portion of East Multnomah County has a high Spanish-speaking population, and they're just now starting to get some materials into Spanish. There's a lot more to do regarding reaching people of different languages, different income levels. I also study sign language. So hopefully I can do my part to kind of bridge the communication gaps around soil and water health.
That sounds great.
So.
Yeah, and November is when you will learn.
November 6th, so you may be watching this before or after. But I hope you voted for somebody. I think that participation is really important, and the more people participate, particularly they show that the more women that participate, the better outcomes in terms of community health and things that are tended to be thought of as progressive. So.
And then a couple of days from now, today's the 11th of October, a couple of days from now, this show will be available on my website, www.donbaham.com, and before it'll be on my website before it's broadcast from the studio. So just so that people can learn where to watch it before it's broadcast.
Okay.
And how are we doing in the control room there? Are we about ready for a break? Yeah, let's take a break right now, all right?
All right.
So the mics are off.
Okay.
Hello, they usually do, but anyhow, we're back, and thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And we're talking about genetically modified organisms, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. And my guest is Kelly Caldwell.
Hi.
Thanks again. And we're back again. All right. So, what's an organism?
What's an organism?
You got to remember that the viewers here are all levels of education and learning and sophistication.
I think an organism could be anything that's alive, anything that cells. Yeah, and when we start talking about, well, what are genetically modified organisms, you really have to step back and say, how do plants and animals intermix and breed? And when people use genetic engineering, what they do is using a gene gun or using bacteria or viruses, they add content into a plant or animal that normally could never be there without the help of science.
Help of science.
Some people think it's helpful. There's a lot of information that it's harmful. And in fact, the first commercial genetic engineering was done in 1996. The research started previously. Basically, things were in research, but in 1996, corn and other products started to get on the market that were genetically modified, which means that instead of being mixed with corn for breeding, they were injected with elements, aspects that they never would be able to in nature. For example, about 68% of things that are genetically modified have been with bacteria or viruses, so that those plants, we were talking about plants in particular, are able to tolerate increasing amounts of herbicides. And another proportion, about 13%, are adapted so that they can be have their own insecticides.
Pesticides.
So yes, and then there's another segment that have both pesticide and herbicide aspects to them. So the majority, well over 80% of plants that have been genetically modified commercially are so that they have pesticides or herbicide components to them.
Why do they do that? Why do humans do that to plants?
Well, for large-scale corporate farming, some people think that it's a good idea. If you put a lot of, actually, the vast majority of plants that are herbicide resistant that have been genetically modified to be herbicide resistant are so that you can use Roundup on them. Roundup is the trademark name for a product called glucophosphate. And that basically it kills everything around it except the corn or soybeans or...
Kind of like Agent Orange?
You know, it's funny that you say that. Monsanto, the company that developed Roundup, is the same company that provided the United States government with most of a big part of the Agent Orange back in the Vietnam War. So this is a company that creates chemicals and wants to sell chemicals. So. Yeah. Perhaps it's a slightly cynical point of view. It's my point of view. Some people say that the main benefit of genetically modifying food crops is so that certain companies can sell more chemicals because the vast majority of those crops are modified so that you can use more herbicides on them. And in fact, since 1996, we in the United States used 1.5 million tons of Roundup herbicide at that time, and now we use over 90 million tons. So in a 10-year period, gosh, I haven't done the math on that, but between 1.5 to 90 million ton increase.
I think there's been some research that shows that over a long period of time, the use of these herbicides and pesticides, you might have a change in the amount of produce of what you're looking for, but then it tapers off, and the effect of this treatment, this genetically modified treatment, doesn't work.
The advertising, the reason, when companies started doing this, they were talking about increasing crop yields and making it more affordable. And the evidence has shown is that you might have a couple years of crop yield, but then you actually go down, and that you not only have to use more and more herbicides, but you have to bring stronger ones. And one of the unexpected and unanticipated aspects is that there's been the creation of super weeds that have adapted, because plants mix out there, certain plants especially, things like canola, which is over 90% of the canola in the United States is genetically modified to be herbicide resistant. And that canola breeds with weeds. It breeds with lots of different crops. It's kind of a very promiscuous plant, if you will. And what's happened is, in that case and in many other cases, the development of super weeds that need stronger and stronger herbicides, or that simply cannot be fought in traditional methods. So what's happening is this this enthusiasm to use science to improve is done without the proper respect for what can happen and the unintended consequences. And there are many unintended consequences. And there's been recent evidence to show that a lot of the data saying what's wrong with this has been hidden. For example, in the last year and a half, there was some research showing that bees were being negatively impacted by genetically modified crops, and Monsanto bought up the company doing research and put a gag order on them so that the data could not come out. And that there's actually, in my little report here, there are over a dozen instances of inappropriate use of government control and science, stifling of science. When the news is bad, they just cover it up.
Yeah.
So there's more, but still evidence is coming out. Just in the last several months, there's been research from France documenting the danger to human health, to rats and then to humans from eating Roundup corn.
A lot of other countries do not allow Monsanto and all those kind of products in their farms.
That's very true. There's countries all over the world that have banned genetically engineered food products, and there's 40 countries that require labeling, which is a big issue this fall in California. Measure 37 is the first ballot attempt in some time to try to label GMO foods. I was actually part of an attempt to get labeling on the ballot this fall with GMO-free Oregon, but we were stymied by some of the corporate lobbyists, and they
Really?
we as you may or may not know, there's a great petition process to get ballot initiatives in Oregon, and first you have to get 1,000 ballot signatures, and then you go through several different processes. And there's many points where those processes can get delayed and appealed. And there was some corporate lobbyists that would wait till the very last day and then appeal through every step. They basically ran the timeout on us. But our group is planning to work on the next opportunity to get labeling of GMO foods on the ballot in 2014, which is our next opportunity. And we are also working, talking to state legislatures to see if we can get a legislative initiative. We've got a few conversations going. We're not sure how successful we'll be, but we'll work on it. And then there's also groups working at different county levels. Benton County and Jackson County are both very active right now because there's changing regulations regarding genetically engineered sugar beets coming into those counties. And in the Willamette Valley area, there's issues with canola coming in right now. So Oregon and the Pacific Northwest are an active battleground in terms of fighting the pollution, the encroachment, the contamination of genetically engineered plants. And you know, our neighbors to the south are doing it at a bigger scale. You know, over $40 million has been raised by Monsanto and other companies to fight
California
labeling. But you know, I think whether you feel that genetically engineered food is great or whether you feel that it's harmful, I think that I would think that we would all agree that we should have a right to know, that individuals should have a choice and be able to choose whether or not they buy and consume genetically engineered foods, and that labeling foods will enable us to further study whether or not they're harmful to human health, because right now it's not being tracked very well.
What a marvelous way of controlling all of what's going on in our country if all plants are owned by Monsanto and nobody can grow anything. And corporations are really beyond the pale when it comes to this master plan. For indefinitely in the future, there'll be no more non-GMO crops.
And one thing to know is that there's an aspect called Terminator technology, which sounds kind of
Yes.
futuristic and scary. And
talk about that.
And it is. It's what they do is they make it so that if we were to grow a certain plant, we were to buy some seeds from Monsanto or one of the other companies, there's just a handful that are the major players, that these seeds won't be fertile. They won't reproduce. And they do that so that farmers have to buy seeds over and over. And so that could be seen as a problem for corporate control. But another unanticipated problem is if those plants unintentionally or by circumstance interact with other plants, that they can pass on those
Characteristics.
whether they be Terminator technology so that they don't reproduce, they're sterile seeds, or whether they be resistance to herbicides or insecticides or the other types of modifications that are out there. I mean, the thing is that we can't really control nature. And so there's going to be unintended consequences, and we're already seeing that. And I think there's just going to be more and more of that if we don't get a handle on this.
But we are controlling nature with corporations, with their efforts and Roundup and those kinds of things. So what can we do to turn things around?
Well, I think one of the first things that we can do, and probably the best thing that we can do for our own well-being, is to educate ourselves about which types of products are likely to be genetically modified, and to make it clear to companies that we want to know if we're eating them, and we may choose not to eat them. So there's a number of products that are very likely to be genetically modified. Those are corn. About 88% of corn is genetically modified. Soy, over 90%. Alfalfa, cotton, sugar beets. About 70% of the sugar is made from genetically modified sugar beets. You should eat cane sugar instead if you're going to eat sugar. And then other products that are genetically modified that people might not think of, those are the big ones, are papayas from Hawaii.
Really?
Yes.
I eat papaya every day.
Well, if you're eating papaya from Hawaii, it's probably been genetically modified, and they've done that to try to make it resistant to a virus. Same thing with crooked neck squash. But a lot of other products they haven't really done at a large commercial cultural scale yet.
How do we stop this madness?
Well, labeling is the first step, and being aware of what companies fund things, fund the campaign against labeling, because that should tell you something. If they don't want you to know what's in the food, they might not be trustworthy for you to be letting them feed you. So there's a lot of information on that. There's pages you can print out of companies like General Mills and Coca-Cola, all kinds of companies that are funding our fight against our right to know. And probably one of the things that each of us could do for our own health and to fight genetically engineered foods is to stop eating high fructose corn syrup, because just about all high fructose corn syrup is definitely made with genetically engineered corn. So, and it's not good for you anyway.
And what's going to be the long-term result of that now, succeeding generations?
Well, there's no research on humans to tell that yet. We've been eating genetically engineered products in our culture for about 15 years now. And what we do know is that there's a huge increase in allergies. Certain items have been tested, like soy. There was a test in England that showed that genetically modified soy had 7 times the number of allergens in it that organic soy did. So there's allergies, there's lots of documentation of liver problems, reproductive problems. There's quite a range of health issues for humans, but human health is not the only factor. We also are seeing that 50% less monarch butterflies, and that's due to GMO corn pollen and other types of pollen that affect butterflies, bees. And bees are super important pollinators to make sure that our flowers, all kinds of crops.
They're like the canary in the coal mine.
Exactly. So we're seeing beneficial insects being harmed by these products. And those weren't intended, but I think we're just going to see more and more unintended consequences. People maybe were trying to do something good or make a buck, but the ones that pay are nature or each of us with our own health issues.
Personal question. I do a lot of oat bran.
Oat bran.
Yeah. And where can I get oat bran that isn't genetically modified?
Well, oats aren't one of the big ones for genetically modified food. It's soy, corn. Soy and corn are the big ones there, right? Alfalfa, cotton. Oh gosh, I've lost my list. Sugar beets, those are some of the big ones. And canola. Canola oil. If you're eating canola oil, you're eating genetically modified products. And there's a couple more things I want to touch on. One of them is that in many cases, well, first of all, the bacteria and viruses that are being injected into seeds to make these changes that are desired, there's the issue of whether that change is harmful. But then there's the fact that these bacteria and viruses weren't in our food before. So there's the carrier, and that's questionable, and then there's what's the change. And both the method and the change, there's room for things to go very, very wrong. One of the things that's been identified recently is that there's a type of corn called BT corn. It's meant to have the insecticide right in the plant so that insects who eat that plant will die. And they were just sure that it was fine for human consumption. What they found, though, is that those bacteria that carry that change for the corn can actually get incorporated in our guts. And there's been some evidence that some people actually are making insecticide in the bacteria in their gut. This,
oh my God.
I mean, I look it up on the internet. I'm not a scientific expert in that area, but there are so many things. Another thing that was, you know, when they first started doing this, there's also some genetically modified rice, but it's really not in this country, that's not happening. The idea was that it would create bigger yields. What they've actually found is that with the droughts that have been happening, that the genetically modified species suffer worse, that they don't stand up well to the harsh conditions. The plants are weaker, and that the organic varieties actually are hardier plants. So kind of the advertising of how good these plants are don't work out. They've started to study things like the root structures of these genetically modified plants and finding out that those root structures are not as stable, they're not as good, that the man-made changes aren't really as good as nature. But nature's been working on it a lot longer. So we really want to identify the difference between classic hybrid plants, classic creation of new species through hybrids, and this intervention of gene guns, which can disrupt the DNA. We don't know what kind of mutations they will cause. Using bacteria, using viruses to make changes in plants that people are basically doing to sell more herbicide and to make some money.
Make money.
It's basically about making money. So, there's human health consequences, there's ecological consequences, there's the reduction in biodiversity that happens when a few types of seed are being sold to everyone, as opposed to people being able to save seed and have, hundreds and thousands of different types of corn, for example. There are places that now have 2 or 3 options, as opposed to, 100 years ago when there was dozens, if not hundreds, of types of corn that you could buy that seed and grow it.
So all we can do now is see if we can pass some sort of laws that we can have what's being sold, what I'm buying, is labeled as to whether or not it's GMO or not.
Well, I'm in favor of the laws of passing laws that would require labeling so that we can make the choices. But you can educate yourself now, and you can still buy things that you know are organic or that are not the types of products that are genetically modified. And the other thing that you can do is grow your own. I'd like to have us have a Let's Grow Our Own campaign. If we know that we've planted seeds that are not GMO and we've grown them, we are having the freshest, healthiest food possible. So you don't have to wait for the government. You can grow some of your own produce, or you can buy produce from local farmers that you can actually meet at farmers markets, or folks out on Sauvie Island that do CSAs, which are community-supported agriculture. There's tons of things that you can do besides just passively keep buying General Mills, which has lots of GMOs.
So there are places where you can buy pure or original kinds of seeds that are not GMO.
But you have to look specifically for them. One of the things that Monsanto and Syngenta and some of the other companies have done is buy up seed companies and store. They're controlling them all. They're not selling them anymore. So you really got to check your seeds. You want to make sure that you're not buying GMO seeds.
So it looks like the direction we're heading, unless something happens on a radical level in controls and regulations and government's behavior, then we're heading down a terrible path. I'm thinking about, I was just watching a show the other day on PBS, Oppenheimer and the splitting of the atom in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And when the atom was split, Oppenheimer had a profound statement from the Bhagavad Gita. We're destroying worlds. So the possibility of the consequence of genetically modified, all seeds for growing food for life, owned by some huge corporation. It seems like we're breaking through a barrier that should not be broken through like we did with splitting the atom.
You know, I wouldn't necessarily, I think technology's helped us. I think that technology on its own is neither, it's kind of value neutral. But we do know that there are many unintended consequences of technology run amok or technology that is not regulated. One of the problems we have is that the Food and Drug Administration has basically done nothing almost to help protect us against the risks of genetically modified food. One of those reasons why is because there's lots of, you know, for example, a guy named Mike Tyler, let me check my notes. Mike Tyler, he is the current food safety czar. He used to be a lawyer for Monsanto. So Clarence Thomas used to be a lawyer for Monsanto.
Yes.
So what we've seen here is a real corporate takeover of our government, in particular when it comes to regulations that affect our safety. And I think that is very suspect. And we see technology being used to make a buck as opposed to being used to create added value. Even if the intentions are good, we know that nature bats last and that it cannot be controlled. What happens in a lab is very, very different when things get to a larger scale or out in nature. We can't really predict what's going to happen, and I think we should use the precautionary principle at all times.
I like the language you use and how we talk about things. You say make a buck. If we were to examine that, that's not what they're about, making a buck. And making millions
of bucks. Yes.
So then the government, our government is not behaving responsibly as far as human welfare and social concerns.
They seem to be protecting the right. They seem to be protecting the right of a few people to make a lot of money at the expense of others.
You change that.
Yeah, the right of a few people to make a lot of money at the expense of human health, at the expense of environmental health, is what I see. A certain political bent, and I'm not in favor of that at all. I think that it's fine for people to do well, but who pays those costs? And sometimes it's really hard to assign a dollar value to someone who maybe has a chronic health issue because they ate GMO food for years, or now that there's no more monarch butterflies in certain areas. You can't really put a dollar value on that, but that certainly hurts us all, I think.
What about the government? How are we going to have the government be responsive to our needs, the social concerns like that?
Well, you know, certainly voting, being politically active, working on ballot initiatives, but I think that we also need to be empowered as individuals to grow our own food, to educate ourselves so that we know what choices are there for us. And in particular, I think one reason why we see Monsanto and 40 other companies fighting against labeling is because over 90% of people are in favor of labeling. And I think once people know, they're going to make the healthier choices. And so there's even been some experts at Monsanto saying that they might as well put a skull and crossbones on their food. And in fact, the cafeteria at Monsanto at Monsanto headquarters, their cafeteria does not have genetically engineered food. That should tell you something.
Yeah. So my point is, I'm repeating myself again in a different way, that unless we have the government speak for us, a government that represents our point of view, and as long as the corporations and the lobbyists are influencing them, then they're not going to pass legislation to curb these kinds or to control these kinds of corporations and what they're doing. We've got to change government. On a personal level, and then on a super level, we've got to have government be responsive.
And I'm running for office for the Soil and Water Board as a way to try to do that at a small level. I think that it's a long road to hoe to change government, that we see a lot of entrenched corporations in our government right now.
It always is a long way to go with changing government.
Over 1 million people gave comments to the FDA about GMO foods. That's more people who've commented about food safety than on any other topic ever. So people are concerned, but that doesn't mean our government is listening.
But who is the FDA? Who?
It's a government agency. Yes.
The government, if it's in
It's
the
a
hands
corporate
of the-
agency practically, but
Thank you. Okay, we got to start winding down.
can I tell you about a few websites that might be interesting for
You
people?
got about 30 seconds. Go for
Okay,
it.
GMOfreeportland.com has some great resources about how to educate yourself about what to buy, and even a shopping list type of setup. GMOfreeoregon.org is the group I'm part of, making a change at the Oregon level regarding labeling of GMOs. And there's some great web pages like GMOawareness.org and the GMO Free Project with a little purple ladybug is a great way. If you see the products labeled GMO Free with the GMO Free Project, then you know that those are safe to eat as well as eating organic. Yeah.
All right, so it looks like it's time to close. So keep your pens and pencils handy in case you may want to jot down something that we'll list in the closing credits. A few PSA, public service announcements. To get the Dr. Don local broadcast schedule, go to my website, www.donbaham.com, and click on present day activities. And the next PSA I want to tell you about is, what do we have here? To watch the Dr. Don shows on the web, go to my website again and click on favorite links. There's a whole lot of shows from the past that are available for you to see there 24/7. And I want to tell you about the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. Without the ACLU, I think our civil liberties would be further down the tubes than they are right now. And what else can we tell you about? To get my shows broadcast by other stations in other communities around the country, ask your local public access station to go to www.pegmedia.org, www.pegmedia.org, and you will learn how to have my shows broadcast from your local venue. And end corporate personhood now, go to www.movetoamend.org. We got to end corporate personhood and take our country back. And thanks for watching. And remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable.
Thank you.
Be kind, and be friendly, and be charitable. To you too. And you.
Thank you.
And you. Thanks again for watching, and I've enjoyed your being here again. And we didn't talk about how I met you before, but in another activity like this, you're doing wonderful work.
Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night.